Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another episode of Ranking the Albums, and in the co-captains' chairs today for this At the Gates kind of like a memorial type of thing. Today we've got Count Ralphus is here, Ralph Tamborra from the Hudson Valley Squares, also from the Hudson Valley Squares. Ryan Skow is in the house as well. We
What's
got
up?
I got two dogs with me. I hope they keep quiet. They're playing behind me. I
I
got the
got I got the eternal face licker here.
There you go. Yeah. I've got my little man and my big girl are in here wrestling
I,
and
s- I see her. Yeah, I see their heads like, oh, yep, there they are. Yeah.
they're gonna keep popping up. It's like, you guys ever see like those old like Godzilla movies like King Kong versus Godzilla or the second Godzilla raids again. You see some shots and all of a sudden you see off in the distance above a mountain, you see they use the puppets and they're fighting each other and stuff like
Oh
that.
yeah, yeah.
That's like what you're gonna see here. Every now and then you're gonna see the two
Yeah,
heads
I see
popping
it
up
just
around
wrestling
one
around.
another. So of course, this week we lost, Tomas Lindell, obviously to cancer at 52 years old, which really sucks. So kind of made the importance of doing this episode quickly, kind of push this up because I was going to do At the Gates somewhere down the road a little ways, but I figured it made a lot of sense to pay tribute to Tomas to have a duo album ranking of At the Gates this week. So I figured let me ask my two buddies here who I know are very familiar with this catalog. Right,
hmm
so we got seven full length studio albums. I know Ryan's going to talk a little bit about the EP, which is also pretty important early on. But we got seven studio albums. We'll rank them as we like them. And why don't we go two, 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 and one, right? So we'll do two, two at a time, and then our final pick, which I think we know what that final pick's going to be. But we'll start with Ralph to give his number seven and number six.
All right, my number seven is the last one, The Nightmare of Being. Um, it's I love like Spectre of Extinction, and I feel it's the most experimental album. Garden of Cyrus has horns on it and stuff, and then Cult of Salvation's great. Touched by the White Hands of Death, The Abstract of Enthroned. I got to say, I like every album by them, and it's cool to me that this album's a little experimental, a little different because, just to mix it up a little. But I think throughout the years, it's always like At the Gates, but they definitely got like a different sound here and there on different albums, whether it's production or whatever. But I think this is a really good album, but I got to put one last, and it's the one I'm least familiar with. Then my number six is To Drink from the Night Itself. The title track's great. The way it kicks off the album. A stare bound in stone, the chasm, the colors of the beast, in death they shall burn. Um, I like the re-recording of the Rape by the Light of Christ, and it's another really great one. And it was good that it was like a good break in between albums when this one came out. But again, it's like the two that I'm like least familiar with, But I did get this one when it came out, and I think it's a pretty cool album cover. A lot of their album covers are like nothing special to me, but that one's pretty cool. It's got a cool like atmosphere to it. But yeah, that's my six and seven.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think the quality of this catalog all throughout is really, really good. And even though you can kind of tell the different eras of the band, it still always sounds like At the Gates, and it's always really good. I had a hard time with this ranking because all these albums are either very solid to obviously great and such an important band in the history of this style of music. I mean, would we even have like the US metalcore scene if it wasn't for At the Gates? We wouldn't even have a lot of the Swedish bands sounding like they do if it wasn't for At the Gates. So it's just so important to the history of extreme music. Just it's a tragic loss, and we'll see. Have they said anything about the band continuing on, or is this kind of going to be it? I don't even know.
So the day before Thomas went in for surgery, for I guess it was mouth cancer, he recorded demo tracks of the vocals for the next album. Uh, and they did it out of order because bands don't usually record vocals first. They had all the music written, is my understanding, but they did vocals first so they could capture him. He went in for surgery and, of course, never recovered. And now this unfortunately happened. So they do have his vocals captured for the next album, which is cool. So when that's going to come out, what it's going to sound like, if they're going to continue. They haven't said anything, and I imagine it'll be a while before. I couldn't see them. I mean, I could speculate, just pure speculation, Ryan Scout speculation. I could see them doing like a memorial or a tribute concert with some like of their contemporaries on vocals, but personally, I would have a hard time picturing them continuing with somebody else
would
because
agree.
he's such an iconic part of the band, and his vocals are very, in my opinion, very unique.
Yeah.
And hearing anybody else behind the mic permanently with the band would be tough. It would be a tough sell for me personally. I'm like, I don't know. Like I would go see a tribute, but if it was like a regular, like, okay, this is our guy now, I'm like, I don't know about that. But they do have another album in the tank, with him on vocals, which is, fucking awesome. So that's
Maybe it
that's
makes
What
sense
a,
to
what a
just
great idea! What a great idea to do that. Like even if he would have made a recovery, it would have been years of recovering from a mouth. He's a vocalist, so for him
yeah.
to have mouth, I'm like, he could have maybe 2 years from now been, if he got through it, maybe been able to sing at that level again. But he also might have never been able to sing at that level again.
true.
So to try to squeeze
Exactly.
them vocals in, it's a real genius. At least he would have had one last thing he did, even if he did survive this. But
I
Yeah.
agree. I remember
sad.
there's somebody, I think I did a video with Jamie at a Ralph review show, and someone commented, he's like, that's the 245th show in a row where Ryan Scales mentioned Voivod. So mark another one. But it reminds me kind of like what Voivod did when Piggy was
Yeah,
sick,
with
he was
Piggy.
passing away. He recorded all this music, just guitars, nothing else. Maybe he had scratch tracks behind it. And then the rest of the band took those guitars, and they built two full albums out of it, Guitars and Infinity,
Yeah.
which was cool. Not my favorite Voivod stuff, but I heard as soon as I heard that Thomas did that, I'm like, that's cool. At least they got that, this one last
Hmm.
thing. So very touching. And I'm sure when that album comes out, it's going to be a very emotional affair, knowing, what we know. So
That would be probably the perfect swan song for the band. And I think, obviously, I'm sure the rest of the band is going to want to continue to make music, but maybe it's time after that album release to put the name At the Gates to bed and then just start something
I,
new, whether they do it together or they go
I would
this.
agree.
But I guess time will tell, right? Because
Yeah.
we've
And
seen
they
Stranger Things, right?
Yes.
they all have different projects too.
Yeah.
They've all been in different bands and stuff. So At the Gates kind of it's been a thing that they've come back to, but then the other bands like the Haunted and stuff like that had been long careers, and he had Thomas had the Sphere and stuff like that still
Yeah.
going.
Oh yeah, he did. I mean, that's one of the, we'll talk about that later as we go, but yeah, that guy, besides At the Gates, like he was the vocalist for tons of bands and a lot of styles, like punk, all different kinds of styles of music, heavy music, grindcore, very very good at all of them too, so
I mean, I thought the Night Rage stuff was great also, so
Night
it's,
Rage, yeah, yeah, definitely did a lot of really cool bands.
yeah.
It shows his range as a vocalist too, because it's not he doesn't sing the same with each different band. It kind of fits more whatever music style he's doing.
Oh,
So
big
it
time.
shows that he's not like a one kind of style. And even in At the Gates, I think I hear different influences throughout.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely.
All right, Ryan, what do you got for your 7 and 6?
Well, I don't want to be unexciting here, but I'm literally just going to switch what Ralph just did. Uh, so this band to me, we'll talk about this more as we go, but the significance of this band to me personally, within like getting into music, getting into heavy music, is tremendous. And the reason for that is because this is actually an interesting thing about At the Gates. I'm 43, which puts me getting into music, heavier music, in the latter half of the 90s, 95, 96, 97. That's when I was getting into it because that's when I was a teenager, like 13, 14, 15, 16. And for a specific age group of people, my age group of people, this band it's hard to explain because I've had this conversation many times with like older folks who came up with metal maybe in the first half of the 90s or the 80s or the late 70s. And they're like, At the Gates, cool band, just another cool band, right? And I'm like, it wasn't like that. Like, for whatever reason, which I've never really figured out, this band was like the band in a lot of ways. And in fact, they were the first death metal band I ever heard and ever got into. I'm just, and I've had a lot of conversations with people in my age group, and they're like, yeah, before I heard Morbid Angel, Obituary, Deicide, Suffocation, before I heard any of those bands, I heard At the Gates. And how does that happen when they're a Swedish band and like we're Americans and there's obviously all these local bands? I don't know. That's an eternal question because we got a lot of cool death metal bands right here from New York, but for whatever reason, before anybody recommended any of those bands, I even heard any of those names, I heard At the Gates. So, and I have a lot of people in that age group that happened to. So their significance to me is fucking crazy, but we're going to start with this. So my last one, I'm going to do their next to last album, To Drink from the Night Itself. Like you guys said, these guys have no bad albums. It was a situation where because they were so impactful and iconic to me, when I heard they were reuniting, I'm like, awesome. But I'm like, man, the early original run of albums from early 90s to Slaughter of the Soul, was so meaningful to me. I'm like, I don't know if a reunion album could ever reach what that means. Like just, it's like hearing a new album from a favorite band, but it's not going to impact you like what you heard when you were 14 or 15. It just can't. It really can't in a way. But the stuff is very good. Like you guys said too, they expanded outward. They got a little more experimental. They didn't just repeat because there's an obvious album that they could have just kept ripping off over and over again, and people would bought it. People would probably love it, and they choose not to do that, which is awesome. I agree. This album art, I agree with Ralph. I forgot to look up the artist, but that's really really cool cover.
Yeah.
Um, I was fortunate to see them a couple times. This T-shirt's from Maryland Death Fest when they played 2014. I
Oh,
saw their first
nice.
first reunion shows in New York, and they played Irving Plaza. I was a little too young because I know Ralph posted the other day when they played here in '96. So I was just a little too young to go see it then. So I think we said Napalm Death right at the chance. But
Yep.
yeah, cool album. And the other thing too, like Pete said, uh, well, this wasn't known when they first came around and broke up, like 96, 97. Since then, in the early 2000s onwards, they became, well, nothing, it's not their fault. You can't blame the band for this. They became one of the most ripped off metal bands ever. Like the whole metalcore scene, all those early 2000s, like Shadows Fall, Unearth, Darkest Hour, Trivium, like all these bands came around. Some of them got very popular on their own. And every time I heard one, I'm like, that's just at the gates riffs under like a fresh coat of paint. Some were like obvious, like Darkest Hour is like, all right, here's at the gates with like metalcore riffs. Like they were brazen. Some of them were a little more subtle, but over the years you heard like a billion bands were like, man, at the gate, it's crazy. They almost like which is kind of like ironic because when I first heard At the Gates, I heard Slayer riffs. And Slayer, of course, is a very ripped off band, so it's like the thing passes on through time. But yeah, my last one's gonna be this one. Great album, very cool, very experimental. Like Ralph said too, the re-recording of "Right by the Light of Christ" is cool. The bonus tracks are cool. I like that they didn't repeat themselves, but someone's got to be last, and that's it. My second to last one is their up till now most recent album, "The Nightmare of Being." A weird album. This is kind of cool. They do some stuff that's like kind of like moody. Uh, I don't want to use the phrase goth or like post-punk, but like there's some parts in these riffs on this album that are like they're not even really metal. It's just like very textural and experimental, but it's cool. It's not here's Slaughter of the Soul again and again. So like let's do something different. So a cool album. I admit when I heard this one, here doggy. Uh when I first heard this one, I did not like it on first listen. I'm like, that's odd. When I'm, here I am saying I like when bands do that, but it took a little bit for it to sink in. But yeah, after a couple listens, I really came to like it, and it's good. These guys never fucked up. Hope the next album is also good. I'm sure it will be. But yeah, it's my second one. Is The Nightmare of Being. I believe this was 2018, right? 2021. 2021. This one came out. So those are my first two picks.
All right, so leave it to me to deviate a little bit here. So, like I said, I like all these albums. I came into this band with the very much celebrated middle of the catalog. And I didn't really start diving into the really early stuff till a little bit later on, kind of around the same time where they got back together and started putting out new stuff. So I don't really have any bias here other than to the stuff that I jumped in on first. And again, it pains me to put anything at number seven because I think all these albums are really, really good. But I'm going to go with their debut, The Red in the Sky Is Ours from 1992 as my number seven. I think it's really great. I think it's very different. That's what I like about this catalog is you have those first two albums that are much, much more in like a kind of like a traditional death metal style before they really start to develop the Gothenburg sound. But it's really old school, raw and rough production. I think it's really good. There's a lot of really good like technical riffs on this album, which I like a lot because it reminds me kind of like the Florida scene. Some great stuff here. Kingdom Gone is great. I love the title track. There's some good twin guitars and big riffs on stuff like Through Gardens of Grief. Within, really, really good. The Night Comes Blood Black is really good. It's a really good album. It's a fun start. I think they would get better as a band going forward, but I really like it a lot. My number six, I'm going to go with Fear I Kiss the Burning Darkness, which is their second album from 1993. Again, produced by the band Peaceful Records. Amazing how many bands were on Peaceful early in the day, right? I mean, it's like,
Oh yeah, great label back
what a
then.
roster, man, I tell you. Um, I like that this album sounds very different than the debut. I mean, production-wise, it doesn't sound anything like it. It's still really heavy, still has this kind of like claustrophobic production. But it's still raw, but maybe not as much as the first album. And I think his Tomas's vocals are taking on like a little bit of a raspier tone. He's got more of like a traditional death metal growl on the first album, but there's some great stuff on here. I mean, The Break of Autumn is killer. Ryan, you mentioned how maybe they borrowed a little from Slayer early in their career. I totally hear it on this album. There's lots of Slayer influence on this album.
Mm, big
Um,
time.
Non-Divine, really good. The drums are great. I love the big Primal Breath 7 minute long epic. It's just so good. It's just like this nonstop assault of kind of technical riffs. It's just so good. The vocals are ferocious. Blood of the Sunsets is great. I think there's great guitar work on this album across all these albums, actually, and it's a really, really good album. But something's got to go somewhere, right? So for me, that's my number six. So I'm going to go with their first two at the bottom, but I still love them. I still think they're really, really good. So back to Ralph.
All right. So, yeah, I'm gonna go next with At War with Reality. It was a great comeback album after 9 years. The Circle of Ruins, Heroes and Tombs, Eater of Gods, the Book of Sand, Order from Chaos, and the title track is so great on this album. And it's kind of cool album cover, different. But it was just great that they were back with something real powerful, and it's kind of what I would expect. They didn't. I'm glad they didn't like start doing their more experimenting when their first debut came back, because then I don't think it would have went over as good. But because you had this one to lead into the next two, it's like a good way of order the way it came out. And then so my next one, I'm gonna go with Fear. I Kiss the Burning Darkness, Right by the Light of Christ, that gets re-recorded later, is a great one. His vocals remind me a little bit like first time I thought he had like a Martin Van Buren kind of vocal style. It's like he has that screaming anguish sound the whole time, but it's different for sure. And then on this, he has more of like a Milla from Creator kind of vocals, even like Mike Score from All Out War. But it's a little different. And I think he goes on more from here and becomes his own like style that he is known for from then on. But yeah, really good album. But yeah, that's it. That's my 5 and 4.
Cool. And Ralph, your video keeps freezing, but I can we can hear you fine.
We can hear you
Okay.
fine. Yeah.
But you're back now. That's good now. Okay.
There you go. Well, I'm not going to be very excited at all because I also have the same order as Ralph. So I think we're probably going to have a very similar order, although very different from Pete, which is interesting. My order is very different from yours, but similar to Ralph. Yeah, and I'm going to actually mirror a lot of what Ralph said. So my next pick is At War with Reality. And this is, like I said before, the reunion albums, even though I like them, they just, in as far as impact, just they can't match the early stuff for me. Just because I grew up with the early ones. And this is again, this is no fault of the band, but it is what it is. By the time this came out, there were so many bands that sounded like this. Like there was a million bands in that Swedish melodic death metal realm. And these guys were always my favorite of all that cohort of bands. Some of them had long careers that continue on today. Some of them changed their sound totally, like In Flames and what Soil Work and whatnot. But having said that, yeah, I agree with Ralph. This album was more of a less experimental. It was more of like just what you'd expect from the band, like just kind of their late. It sounds kind of like the last two albums they did before they broke up: Terminal Spirit Disease and Slaughter of the Soul, but with some little twists. Very interesting, good writing, good playing. Thomas sounds great. It was like a satisfying reissue or new album. You know, it wasn't anything crazy, wasn't anything off the beaten path, wasn't the same album before. They kind of like walked the fine razor's edge and they got it, you know. And of the three reunion albums, I definitely put this one on the most. Yeah, so I like it. It's a good and
I mean, a
like I
lot
said,
of us kind of got like a similar type satisfaction from that album when it came out, like when Carcass came back. You know,
hmm
very competent, very
just
enjoyable,
yeah,
what you'd expect, right? Nothing too crazy, but a very
exactly.
welcome return.
Exactly. I
The
know
more,
and it was a band I never thought would reunite because it seemed like guys said before they had a lot of other bands going on, so I bother because the other bands in many cases were doing quite good on their own. Thomas himself had a ton of projects he was involved in, so like why bring back the old one, you know?
I mean,
Uh,
19 years, it's a long time.
it was quite a while too, but no, it ended up being really good. So that is my next pick. My next one is their second album with Fear Kiss the Burning Darkness. So this is my least. Now we're getting into the original run of material. This is my least favorite of those albums. Uh, so the first early albums, the first EP, Gardens of Grief, The Red and the Sky's Ours, and this album had a different guitarist, a fellow by the name of Alf Svensson, and he brought in a style that was much more. It's almost it's thrashy, more thrash metal, but like very technical. Like it kind of gave me the same feel of the Floridian band Nocturnus, like thrashy, but like these guys are doing lots of complicated chords. It's not just straight up like Slayer, because there are Slayer riffs, like we were saying, but they're really doing some zany shit.
There's some
And the
kind
reason
of
I'm
like
putting this,
pestilent stuff going on some of these early albums, you know?
yeah, I could hear like early Pestilence, like Melodies Melicarum. Reason I put this last of their original material is the guitar playing and the writing is probably the zaniest on this one of all the original stuff. And sometimes it gets to the point where it's like almost like a little like disjointed and like you just want a riff to come in and just like pound you in the head and they're just doing all this crazy shit, which I appreciate, but and it works like I'm gonna say like 9 times out of 10, but occasionally it's just a little feels a little disjointed and weird to me. That's how I'm justifying putting this last of all their original stuff. And the production's good. It's heavy, but it's also my least favorite production of the original run albums. It's kind of like it's not as warm and organic and as heavy as I like, or compared to the other early stuff. But still very, very good. I throw it on a lot. I enjoy it. I have a lot of good nostalgic memories of this one. Uh, like Ralph was saying to you, I'll pull it. I got where I am living now. The glare from the window is bad, so I'll pull it out of the case there. Yeah, the artwork on this one is not particularly interesting. That's nothing I'd be like, oh, I want to get a T-shirt or a patch of that for my vest. Not particularly interesting. But I always loved their logo though. The old logo, that's fucking cool.
Yeah.
The windows, yeah, on the shirt too. So yeah, that's my next one. So there you go.
All right.
I think the thing about that album too is that I forgot to mention was that I don't think they had a lot of time with it, like the songs. Like it seems
Mhm.
like I mean they were putting out like an album a year. They did like 5 albums like back to back to back, and it
Yes.
just seems like they had some really good stuff there, but it just didn't they didn't live with it long enough to like get that flow. Like it could have
Mhm.
if they had a little more time, I think they would have it would have flowed better,
Yes.
like the later next albums do.
No, you're right because the first album is '92 and this is '93, and you're right. It's pretty complicated and involved material. So when you're writing all these long songs, it probably would have been better if they workshopped it a little more, put a little more time into it. But and maybe that's why it does feel a little disjointed. Like, okay, that works. Let's
Yeah,
go next song. And yeah, it's just some of the progressions occasionally. I'm like, that's a weird transition from riff to riff. Like what are we doing here? Kind of throws you off a little bit, but. It's a minor quibble. Like I love the album, and I'm like I
yeah.
got to justify
It,
this being my least favorite of the original material. So that's how I'm going to do it. Is my
Yeah, the flow is a little off on it compared to the
I agree.
flow on the next two albums are just perfect, you know.
I agree.
All right, my number five, I'm going to go with To Drink from the Night Itself from 2018, their sixth album, Century Media Records. I mean, they had a major switch in guitar players, right? So Anders is out and Jonas is in. Still sounds like At the Gates to me. I don't know. I think there's really good stuff on here. I think maybe this album has some of Tomas's most kind of like varied vocals.
Mhm.
He's like touching on a lot of different things here, and maybe it's just showing the full maturity of his vocal style. I think he's amazing on this album. Some great songs on here. A Starbound in Stone is excellent. Palace of Lepers has some of my favorite riffs on the album. It's just really, really good. Daggers of Black Haze is cool. Colors of the Beast absolutely crushes. So good. There's great solos on here. The guitar work is terrific. You could probably make the statement that some of the stuff on this album is a little samey. I think you've got the nice variety on Tomas's vocals, but some of the arrangements are a little samey. But I think the songs are great, so it doesn't really matter all that much to me. So that's my number five. My number four is going to be At War with Reality, their reunion album. I love the production. Got Frederick Nordstrom, right? He's worked with a million bands. So good. Kind of interesting when you read up here that they originally did not want to record new music, right? They were just like, we'll just come back, we'll play some shows, and we don't want to be one of those bands that just comes back and puts out albums of shit that nobody wants to listen to. But it actually is a really, really good album, I think. Death in the Labyrinth is great. The title track is so good. Conspiracy of the Blind. I mean, there's a lot of really good stuff here. Um, It's a great reunion album. I really dig it a lot. Love the production, and unfortunately, it's the last one with Anders on guitar. But I think it holds up really well in their catalog. I like it a lot. So that's my number four.
I understand that Anders did contribute to the new and upcoming album. That's my understanding. I think he I don't know if he joined the band back. I don't know, but I know I was reading that he did write a lot of the music. And I noticed too, like the difference between those the two reunion albums when Anders left. You definitely notice his the lack of his presence. Still good, I agree, but he has a very unique style where like
Yeah.
it was kind of like when they lost Alf early on and they changed styles dramatically. You definitely like, well, that's got to be that guy because the music he left and the music changed. So who else could it be?
Yep, exactly. All right, Ralph, back to you.
There's a really good documentary on YouTube about At the Gates. It's from a few years ago, but it's like over 2 hours. And
Oh, I gotta watch that. Shit, I didn't know about that.
yeah, I watched it last night for the first time. It was really good. They bring back ex-members and stuff, and
Oh,
it
cool.
was like really. They told that guy Alf. He went on to be a tattoo artist, and he didn't think there was like much money to be made playing death metal at that time. And he ended up doing 3 albums of some other kind of music, but never really joined the band again. And he went to one of their shows. They wanted him to come on stage and play a couple songs, but he hadn't played in a while, so he didn't do it or whatever. But all right. So my next one is the first one I ever got, 1994, and you guys bringing up Peaceville. Like so, back in the day, like if you were into death metal, there were certain labels that if they put something out, you wanted to get it, even if you didn't have the computer to go on and check them out. So you would just get it and then hopefully it's good and then you turn your friends on and they would buy something different from that label and that's how we got turned on to all this stuff. But yeah, Terminal Spirit Disease, the really great album, the title tracks Killer and The World Return, Forever Blind, The Beautiful Wound. I like the three live songs they threw on there just to make it into an album, a full length album, because it was really like an EP. And in that documentary, it's kind of funny because they talk about this cover, and they talk about how like they get it sent to them as like a fax back then, and it was black and white. And they said, "This is we need an okay on this. You guys cool with this?" And they were just like, "Yeah, okay." And then they didn't realize it was like those colors, like a pink and stuff, and they were kind of like, "Ugh." But yeah, this is great album. I think this is the album where they really find their sound that defines them, And then it just the next one is where they really sharpen up that sound. But this was this is definitely the beginning of their where they influence everybody. And then my number two, I'm gonna go with The Red in the Sky Is Ours. And love, love doing early uh so yeah, this one, I mean, they don't really have that sound, and it kind of just sounds like another death metal band, but they were being technical back then. And I love his vocal style on this. I mean, I'm glad he went more into his own style later, because this reminds me of so much of Martin Van Buren, and I love that guy's vocals. He was one of my favorite death metal vocalists. So um right when I heard this album, it's like just that brutal old school death metal style. I mean, they do have melodic parts in there. What's So I wrote down The Season to Come, great lead off track, Kingdom Gone, Within, a couple other. I don't need to go through all the songs. It's just a great album, great debut. And I would put their EP that Ryan would talk about is I put that with that kind of, because it's they that more from the Grotesque songs that they when he was in the band Grotesque.
Guardians of Grief.
Thomas, yeah, yeah, it's a bit of that, and that they both like more of like just a death metal band, but they would have probably went really nowhere. They would have been one of hundreds of bands if they would have stuck with this style. I think if they would have had the kind of production that Slaughter the Soul has on this album, though, it would have been so much better. I think that's the one thing it's really lacking is the production. But they were new to recording and stuff. But that and that EP, they're like a different beast. But I think it's great.
Cool. Ryan?
All right, well, I'm gonna finally divulge from Ralph here a little bit, but I'm not gonna start. So my next one, my number three, is Terminal Spirit Disease. Yeah, this is where Alf left. Guitarists switched. They started the sound that would come to define them in 8 billion other bands. Uh, This album, it honestly, it's got one of the best productions that they ever had, and one of my favorite productions in death metal. Like the guitars on this sound fucking amazing. Just massive, but like clear and crunchy and heavy. Everything sounds good. Drums sound good. Thomas sounds good. Uh, it's awesome. Probably the only reason I'm ranking it now is because it was in hindsight, and I think everybody would agree, it ends up kind of like playing out as like a prelude to what's to come, even though by itself is a very good album. And yeah, the album, the artwork is, I don't think I've ever seen a shirt or a patch of of that art ever. And I've seen, At the Gates, the big band, so I've seen a lot of shirts, a lot of patches, and a lot of, hoodies and stuff over the years, bootleg and official. But I don't think I've ever seen one of this art, and that's probably for good reason because I wouldn't fucking wear it. That is hideous. That is a terrible,
Well, yeah.
terrible cover. But yeah, whatever. You can't let a lousy album cover. And I think we could probably go through and make a list of like bands where the album art came through and they're like, oh, really? That's what we signed up for? That's what you paid for? To the label or whatever. Like, fuck, what the hell's that? We didn't. But the labels, the records at press, like it's got to be, it's already going. Too late to stop that train. So. I don't know if that's exactly what happened, but yeah, it's definitely. I couldn't see a band sitting around deliberating, be like, "This is exactly what we want," Like, yes, we all agree on this, and let's send it to print. But whatever.
That
Um,
documentary explains each album cover, and it
okay.
just is bizarre to me, like how bands don't think of that as such an important, especially back then before the
Oh,
internet. Like
it's
you
big.
went
Yeah.
to a record store and you seen an album cover, and that made you get it. And it's so important. It's so weird when bands just don't put much time or thought into it and
Yeah,
they
it's a
just
different
throw it
story
out there.
now. And I talk to people all the time now who are like, who cares about cover art? I'm like, well, maybe now nobody does. But man, back in the day, you absolutely had to. Because
Oh,
most of the time there was no internet, so you didn't know about any of these bands. You would go flipping through the racks or see something in a magazine. You take a chance on something. And if it has a great album cover, you're more apt to
it
buy it,
is.
right? It's,
I could tell you it's just an anecdotal observation, but like when we do like our favorite albums of the year rankings, and I'm like, these are my favorite 25 albums or whatever year, and then I look at the artworks for those albums. Most 9 times out of 10, it's good artwork because I feel like if the band really cares about the music and they have an original and the music's heartfelt and everything's there, they're going to have enough sense and intelligence to also know that the artwork's important. If you talk to the band members, you do interviews, we know some of these people, they all say that. They're like, yeah, the art's very important. So I think if you get it, you get it.
yes.
Because I was just thinking the other day, I'm looking through my favorite album so far, 2025, kind of piecing together, and I'm looking, I'm like, yeah, there's some really good interesting art here. And then I see some albums that are coming out that I'm not really interested in. And sure enough, I'm like, I don't like the art either. So I think they go hand in hand. Uh,
Yeah.
now,
Yeah,
my
but
number,
that album with me really quick was that
okay.
was just because it was on Peaceville. It's like, all right, I'm gonna try give this a chance, just because they were putting out nothing but brutal and
Yeah,
extreme music.
absolutely. Because if it was based just on the artwork, you might not be like, I'm not going to listen
Oh,
to
I
this.
would have,
It
yeah, it
sucks.
wouldn't even have caught my eye. It wouldn't have caught
But
my eye at all.
all right, so now I'm going to divulge separately here. So this was the hardest. The whole ranking up until now was not bad. It was these two albums. Of course, if you're paying attention, I only got two left. Well, I'm gonna do it. So my number two is the first death metal album I ever bought. When I bought this album, I was listening to Slayer, Metallica, Iron Maiden, Sabbath, Priest. So I was into all that kind of stuff, Testament, Exodus, and I don't really remember exactly how this guy recommended it to me. But like I said, for my age group, it can't be overstated how big this band was. Like, I can imagine at least three conversations where people are like, really? At the Gates? Like, didn't you hear like Deicide or like Morbid Angel first? I'm like, no. But like the late 90s, like those bands were known, everybody talked about them, like they weren't obscure. But for whatever reason, At the Gates just got put in front of you first. Like that was just the band. I don't, and then, it's kind of hard to explain why that happened. Uh, the nostalgia I have for this album is tremendous. But I went based on what I've listened to the most the last couple of years, like what I end up pulling off the rack. And I got to say, my number two, and it feels weird saying this, but it is Slaughter of the Soul. Uh, the artwork on
I
this
had
one
a
was done
feeling you were
by,
going to do that.
well, I really agonized over it. But so the artwork on this one was done by Kristen Whalen, who did the art for a lot of cool black metal bands back then. Had almost a lot of his artwork is like he did work for Dissection, uh, tons of other bands. The band Morbid, which was a original singer for Mayhem. A lot of his artwork have like that purpley blue kind of hue to it. So this one's different. This one has this very, very cool mechanical, kind of very brownish. The logo's cool. Uh, yeah. This was one of those albums where I heard it and it opens up with Blinded by Fear. It has this cool, like weird noisy intro, then it kicks in, then it goes to the title track. And as soon as I heard that, I'm like, well, this is what I'm gonna be doing for the next couple fucking decades is spending money on this and flying around and going to Norway and Germany and stuff to see these bands. Uh, and I'm telling you what, the Slayer albums on this too are pretty pronounced too. So it was a pretty clear transition from going through at the time Slayer were my favorite band on earth. I heard this and it's no way a Slayer ripoff, but you can definitely hear a lot of the thrashy progressions that Kerry and Jeff did so well on this album too. The production, it's by Frederick Nordstrom, Studio Fredman, absolutely fucking massive. I admit, I do like the production a little more on Terminal Spirit Disease because it's a little more gritty, but you can't go wrong with this at all. Uh, every single song on here is fucking amazing. Just heavy, iconic, catchy too. It's so fucking
Oh
catchy.
yeah.
Super like you could sing along to a lot of this stuff. And it's no surprise to me that in hindsight, like of all those melodic, but all the Arch Enemies and the In Flames and the Dark Tranquilities and the Soilworks and that whole scene. And there's a lot of like bands below that too that were kind of like coming up and coming around. This album's always like held up as like kind of like the Rain and Blood of that world. Like there's a lot of, maybe it's not everybody's favorite, but if you lined 1,000 fans, it'd be like, all right, what's the album from that world? You lined 1,000 thrash metal fans up. What's the thrash album? You have to pick one. I think Rain and Blood might come out on top, if you asked enough people. I'd say this one would probably come out on top. You're like, what's the Swedish album? You pick one Swedish album. If it wasn't, I think if it wasn't Left Hand Path or something like that, it would probably be this. Yeah, and so it was hard putting this at number two because the nostalgia for this is just overwhelming. Like I said, my first death metal album. As soon as I heard this, like I was kind of like down the path because it's not pure like death metal, like incantation and relation. There's other elements there too. So it was a pretty easy transition from this to like black metal to everything else. Everything else I heard. I think the second band I heard or got into after this was Emperor. So I went right from this to Emperor, and then I went, I started hearing everything else. But yeah, uh, this is my vinyl copy, so I only got this a couple of years ago. But the original one I got back in the day was my CD copy, which has been played approximately 85 gajillion times. Uh, yeah, so it was tough putting this at number two, but I really just I was like, what have I listened to and enjoyed the most for like the last, I'm going to say decade or so. And I love this album dearly, but it is not my favorite currently, which is I think that's fair. You get into a band, you have your favorite album by them for a long time. I know, Pete, you've talked about this with Black Sabbath. And then as time goes on, you're like, I think it's going to be this album now. I think this one speaks to me more now. That's kind of how it goes when you're a fan of a band for a long time. So my number
It,
two is Slaughter of the Soul.
it does happen. I had a feeling you were going to go that direction.
Mm.
And it's totally normal that you could have a favorite album for decades and all of a sudden something just happens and you don't love it any less, right?
Oh yeah, no, you don't love
Something
it any
else just
less.
kind of rises above and you're like, that's what I'm into more now. So
Hmm.
I totally get that. All right,
I,
my
I
number
like hearing
three.
how I like hearing how he he's going from like Testament and all these thrash bands, and then that's the first death metal album that he hears that he falls in love with.
Yeah,
It's a perfect line to go to that
it's a
instead
great
of going
segue,
to
right? Yeah.
like
Oh,
if he
so
would have
big time.
heard Mortician first, and he probably would have been like, God, I like this thrash and kind of stuff. And there's a ton of thrash elements in
Big
our
time.
at the gates. They're almost like they're one of those bands that are kind of on that line that I bring up a lot where they could be a heavy thrash band or they could be a early death metal sounding band. So they're back and forth on that line all the
Yeah.
time, especially with all the Slayer like
Yeah.
kind of influencing them and
It's
even Creator and all that kind of stuff.
it's not surprising that like that album, like I'm saying for like my age group especially, was like the first album. Because people say, like, how could it be that when there's all these bigger bands? And I get that, but Slaughter is such a catchy, immediate. Like, as soon as I heard it, it was like instantaneous. I'm like, this is fucking incredible. Like, within 30 seconds of hearing it, I'm like, I love this immediately. And yeah, that's probably why it had that effect. Because if it was an album where you're like Mortician or something, where it's like, what's going on? Or if like you heard Onward to Golgotha first, which I fucking love, and
Yeah,
like
it's too big of a
dense,
jump. It would have been too big of a jump. Like,
yeah. So some people would
even with
obviously
me,
love it
like
immediately. What's that?
I was like, Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, and I was starting to find like Metal Church and Jag Panzer and Man of War. Then it was like Anthrax and Overkill before I was into Slayer, and so like it all had to like kind of like
Yeah, it's
step by step
progression.
by step, and then by the time I had like Possessed, then all of a sudden Death didn't wasn't so off the wall to me. It made sense
Yeah.
when Death album came out, and then it just went from there. I just kept going down that and it's kind of weird because when Terminal Spirit Disease came out and I got it, I liked it, but it didn't blow me away because I was already more into like the not as catchy kind of stuff. And but then the next album changes. But all right, that's it.
I agree. Yeah, if you some people would probably hear like On to Golgotha or something, or like Dawn of Possession, and they would love it. But those are dense albums. But this like Slaughter of the Soul is so immediate and catchy. The production is so good that it's no surprise to me that like myself and a lot of other people would hear it and instantly be like, "Yep, this is fucking amazing. I love this, greatest shit ever." And history bears that out because the influence of that album is insane, And I've had conversations with people where they try to dismiss it. They're like, it was just another album. Like, nah, it was not another album. Like, it is iconic in a way that very few metal albums are, and very few Scandinavian albums are. It's just because you could like the bands I mentioned, all these bands that came around, some of them became even bigger. Like, take a band like Trivium, who I don't like, but they became fucking huge. They're a big, big deal. When I first heard them, I'm like, I'm just hearing a lot of At the Gates riffs, like metalcore and like other stuff too. But that At the Gates sound, like that Swedish sound, and when I say Swedish in that context, I'm just referring to Slaughter of the Soul, really. Like you always hear that Slaughter of the Soul sound in tons and tons of bands. So, yeah, I don't think the influence can be denied on that one.
I like the whole idea too of like someone being a massive thrash fan coming over to the Gothenburg scene in general, to specifically this band,
Mm.
because I think it's a perfect transition point. And I would also argue that maybe the Gothenburg scene doesn't quite happen the way it did happen if it wasn't for the US and German thrash scenes. I mean, I really think that a lot of those bands took a lot from that and kind of morphed it into something else. So,
But I would agree.
yeah. All right, so for my number three, leave it to the prog and the psych and the doom guy to have the Nightmare of Being as his number three. You both of you guys mentioned how experimental this album is, and I really like that a lot. This album to me is fascinating because they go in all these different directions. I like a lot of the mid-pace stuff on this album. I like some of these weird kind of doomy psych passages that are injected in this album. It still sounds like At the Gates, but it's very, very different. I love stuff like The Paradox, I think is great. The Garden of Cyrus. I mean, there's saxophone on an At the Gates album, and it weirdly makes sense, right? Which I kind
Of
of like.
course.
Fall of Time, again, it's atmospheric, it's heavy, but it's got loads of atmosphere. There's some really, really cool stuff going on this album. Cosmic Pessimism, to me, sounds like a really heavy prog album, a prog song. I really like it a lot. It's very adventurous. It's very different. It, may not be 100% the At the Gates blueprint, but I think it still sounds like them. And I give them credit for doing something different. So for me, I always really enjoyed this album. It's really good. And now for my number two. So I got my number one was the first album I bought by this band, and I absolutely loved it when I first heard it. And then I immediately went out and got the one that came before it, and I still really love it a lot, and that's Terminal Spirit Disease. I love the production. I think Frederick Nordstrom worked so well with this band, did some great stuff here. To me, their sound and the sound of this whole scene really kind of starts to happen on this album. There's just some great stuff on here. Tomas's vocals are just violent and harsh, but he's really coming into his own. Great stuff. And I love The Swarm. Killer song. Title track just totally kicks ass. Fevered Circle is just epic. I think the drumming is incredible on this album. The Beautiful Wound, Total Blazer, great stuff on here. The live stuff is great. It's eclipsed by the one that comes after for me, but I still think it's really, really good, and it just never gets old. Horrible album cover art notwithstanding, it's a really, really
Mhm.
great album, and I think it's a mandatory purchase if you're someone looking to get into the Gothenburg melodeath scene. It's just so, so good. So, with that, Ralph, let's talk a little bit about Slaughter.
Yep. It's the groundbreaking albums influenced the whole scene, and it's so weird that they work so hard for like these 5 years. They work so hard for these 5 years, and then they create something that's so unique and it's so influential, but they break up after all the touring. They had like some problems touring. If you watch that documentary, you'll see they like lost money on and stuff. They weren't making money. So, but this is where they really start touring the US and stuff, and they're doing good. And it's just weird how I don't know if it was like a burnout thing or whatever, but the one of the Majola brothers there, he quits, and then they don't think they could go on without him, and he's like the primary music writer at the time, so they just let it disappear, which is crazy because that opens the doors for all these other bands to step in and reap the rewards of something that these guys kind of created. It's such a shame. And I was lucky enough to see them when they came to the chance with Napalm Death 96. And I got a kind of cool story. So I put up a couple of pictures to these guys. I took some good pictures of At the Gates, and I took a whole bunch of pictures of Napalm Death that night, but I didn't think I was going to hang out with anybody afterwards. So I used my fun saver back then, and I took 20 pictures, and I just wasted them on my friends like hanging out. And then after the show, uh, both bands were outside hanging out. They were playing a gig the next day at the Wetlands in New York City, but I didn't realize it was like a matinee show that they were doing. So they didn't have to leave from the chance. They wanted to hang out in the parking lot until like 4 in the morning or 5 in the morning, and then I guess drive down. So they weren't getting a hotel that night. So they just stayed in the parking lot. And Mitch Harris from Napalm Death, after there was like 20 people hanging out, taking pictures with them and stuff like that. And then as we were getting ready to leave, Mitch Harris comes out with a case of beer. He's like, "Hey, the Chancellor gave us this case of beer." He's like, "We're just going to be sitting here hanging out. So if you guys want to hang out," we're like, "Yeah, cool." And we ended up staying out in the parking lot until like 4 in the morning. And I got to meet Tomas, but he didn't really hang out long. Like he, after the 20 people disappeared, like him and Barney and a couple other people went in their tour buses and like fell asleep or whatever, just saving their voice for the next day. But so we hung out and just talked music all night. And the Bajola brothers were both there, and but they barely talked. I didn't realize that they probably didn't speak English too good. Like in the documentary, I don't really ever see them speak any English. Um, but they were cool. They just hung out, and they liked having company out there with them all night. We just sat out there and we drank the whole case, and we ended up getting home like 4:30 in the morning, whatever. But it was just really incredible. And Mitch Harris actually had put us on the guest list for the next day to go down to the city. And we are like, "Oh, cool. We'll try to make it." But we weren't like paying attention to the matinee times that they were doing. So we actually got in a truck with friends and we went down to the city, and we got there and the show was over already. We weren't paying attention to, like, we didn't know how early it was. But we almost were going to go to the club and just like sit around and try to hang out with him again. But then we said, screw it. And we turned around. But yeah, that's my story. I mean, I don't have to go through the songs or nothing like that. This album is like a perfect album. I love the production on this album. Andy Larroquette from King Diamond does a guest solo on it, which is amazing. Just a magical album, magical time for them. And who knows what would have happened if they would have stuck from there and just kept on that road, for a couple more years. They might have been the band that, I mean, bands look at them at the influence from them as they are the band that's so big, but really they were playing opening up band, playing small clubs back then, and
Hmm.
they didn't get to get that reward until years later when they came back, and then they got to play bigger venues and stuff. But yeah, great album, love it.
And they were on a really good label at this point, which
Yeah,
I haven't even
Yeah,
mentioned. I mean,
if they
Earache.
had stuck with it, they might have. It's hard to say what could have, should have, but you're right. A lot of other bands came along that basically took what they did and like, all right, now it's ours and we're gonna make money off it, and didn't really change or improve much. They just, here's Slaughter of the Soul, but with metalcore. Here's Slaughter of the Soul, but with like emo vocals or whatever. And they sell all these fucking albums.
Yeah.
Well, these guys invented
yeah,
it,
you
but
can have a lot of combinations, a lot of different combinations of their core sound. You
mhm,
throw different kind of vocals on it, and then you're different something else, but you're still using that melodic thrash kind of sound.
exactly,
Yeah.
big time.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Ryan, how about that debut, huh?
Well, I'm gonna tell you, this is the reason I picked. First off, here once again, that art sucks. Don't want that on a shirt. Don't want that on a
Yes.
patch. It's terrible. The logo is fucking, oh, like I said, always cool, but the
Yeah.
artwork sucks. Uh,
Yeah.
reason I put this as my number one, the debut album, is because over the last quite a few years, I'm just a really big fan of. I was thinking how a way to describe this because I don't want to use the word prog and I don't really want to use the word technical because I mean I guess there's true in both of those. But the word that came to mind for this album and the style of playing that I like is I'll use the word naughty. It's convoluted and it's pretty like technically robust and stuff. But I gotta listen to this and some other bands and albums that have this kind of approach, and they go, that's prog metal. I don't hear that, but it's just there's a lot of shit going on. I like the rawness of it. Yeah, it just appeals to me the most. It's a very different sound than Slaughter of the Soul or any of the reunion albums. It's even a different sound than the second album. It's the only time they really sounded like this. Uh, I do agree with Ralph that this was not particularly a standout. Like Slaughter of the Soul, like we were all saying, was a massive sea change. It was influenced bajillion bands. Uh, if this had all been all they ever did, none of that would have been true because this doesn't sound too different than a lot of other bands. It is. I don't want to be unfair. The combination of very thrashy riffs, kind of like weird progressions, like piano and violin, and like just they throw some of that stuff in there. On the later stuff, like Pete was saying, it's much more intentionally progressive. I feel like on this one, it was kind of like let's just throw that in there, but it works. It works for me. I really like the atmosphere on this one. It's got this dark, moody, I want to say almost gothic at times atmosphere. It's cool. I just really like it a lot. I like the rawness. Then I think of other bands. I mean, they're all obscure underground metal bands, but I think of like the band The Chasm from Mexico. I think of the Australian band Stargazer. Like, there's a lot of these bands now that have this. I hate to say progressive, but you listen to these guys playing guitar, and it's like, man, these guys, it's just crazy, weird shit. I want to say the band Nocturnus again. I always kind of, in my head, I kind of put this on a similar level, like the Key by Nocturnus. I wouldn't really call that prog, but they're doing thrash riffs, but like really just convoluted, weird shit. So I just kind of gravitate towards that. I like that style. I like putting headphones on and just hearing guys like fucking thrashing out and going intense, but it's not just simple straight ahead like they're doing weird shit, weird progressions. Uh, so yeah, but I mean the difference between like this and Slaughter of the Soul to me, I was sitting there like, eh. So I really just said, well, what have I listened to the most over the last couple of years? And it is the debut, but obviously Slaughter was like the life-changing album for me. I didn't get this until a couple of years later, because it wasn't always easy to find. This is a peaceful reissue from 2003, this copy. So I was like pretty set in like my tastes and everything by the time I got this one, but it ended up just becoming my favorite. So I will also mention, because I said I would, their debut EP, The Gardens of Grief, which is different yet. Like this one, the album itself, the first album has that naughty technical thrash. This is just more straight up death metal. I do like this album. I like the artwork on that, the old castle runes there, and it has the different logo too, which they didn't really use much. Kind of earlier iteration of, but yeah, just a four-song EP. It's really cool. Just good stuff. Again, this is even less distinct. Like this does sound more like just Swedish death metal at the time, and which would be like old Tiamat, Treblinka, Entombed, Carnage, like the really early wave of Swedish death metal. This kind of fits in with that, but it's really cool. I like it a lot. Once we're all done, there's another band I'll talk about, which is where this came from, which I really like. But and this was EP, I guess would be more of a transition between Grotesque and then where At the Gates would go. And it fits. It does kind of sound like a meeting of like where they were and where they're going. So and it wasn't like all the same members too, so it would be unfair to say the same band just changed their name. That wasn't the case, but musically it does seem kind of like a transition. So yeah, the EP is very good too. Uh I wouldn't put that as high, but I just figured I'd mention it. But for my number one, it is the debut album. And I figured I'd be the only one to put this at my number one because it's not really referenced that much. But yeah, I like it a lot. I really like that album. So there you go.
I had it at number two, so pretty close. We
Yeah.
had very
I was gonna say
similar.
our rankings ended up being very close.
So back when I first started to really get into death metal, so I was like you guys, well, especially with Ralph, because Ralph and I are almost the same age. I started listening to the very early death metal scene, so bands like Death and Possessed and all those bands that were popping up like in the late 80s. And then like the early 90s, I kind of turned away from metal for a while and I jumped into prog and I spent most of the good chunk of the 90s listening to like progressive rock from the 70s, the 80s, the 90s and whatnot. But then when I started getting back into death metal again in probably like the late 90s, I was in like this rush to catch up and to go after like what some of the classics were of the genre so far and up to that time. And one of the albums that everybody told me I had to go listen to was Slaughter of the Soul. So that really was my introduction to Swedish extreme metal. And I absolutely fell in love with this album. And I went, like I mentioned before, I went out and bought Terminal Spirit Disease like immediately thereafter. But man, this album is just so good. It's like the blueprint for everything that came after. You really can't even measure how influential this stuff was. And again, so many bands follow in their footsteps, and so many bands who probably aren't even worthy of playing the style of music they do. Nothing will ever be as good as this. So many great songs. Blinded by Fear is so good. I mean, Cold is, you mentioned Andy from King Diamond's band. I mean, he plays a great solo on that track. Title track is amazing. The production is massive. Under a Serpent Sun is so good. Suicide Nation is a killer track. There's no bad songs on it at all. And it never gets old. And I hadn't listened to it in a little while, and listening to it again while getting ready to do the show. I was like, man, this is just as good as it was all those years ago when I heard it for the first time. So, and I sit there and think about how cool it must have been to be getting into this album when it first got released, like Brian did, and probably Ralph did as well. I didn't hear it till a few years after that, but just so good and such a like a spark for the scene at the time it was released. And it's always going to be one of those albums that every other band gets measured up against who's doing anything kind of similar to this. So yeah, that's my number one, Slaughter of the Soul, not surprisingly.
I just want to also, while we're talking about it here, so I did mention it a second ago. This is a different band. They never recorded an album. They only did a couple EPs and a demo, and it's firmly tucked away in the underground, and that's fair. But they ended up being so I wasn't able to do the Swedish show with you guys, but if I had, I would have mentioned them because they, as far as I'm concerned, for that early old school evil Swedish death metal, it's very good. But it was Tampa's early band before At the Gates. The band was Grotesque.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And you can't get any of the like the. I mean, if you wanted to find the original stuff now, good fucking luck. But what you can easily get is this compilation called "In the Embrace of Evil." In this case, on CD, it's actually a CD with both the Gardens of Grief EP and then all the grotesque stuff because they only did like 10 songs. Like they didn't do a lot, but it's good stuff. It's really if you like that old the really early like Carnage, Entomb, Dismember, Unleashed, Grave, old Tiamat. Like if you like any of that style of old Swedish death metal, I highly recommend this. Tampa sounds great. It's just like I said, it's not unique for that style, but it's done extremely good. It's the songwriting's good. It's fucking evil. And it is one of those bands where I'm like, man, I wish they had done an album. I mean, the album would have been pretty obscure and underground, I'm sure, but I would have loved to hear it. But they never did. They only did a couple songs. They broke up. At the Gate started, and the rest is history. But yeah, if you do like that old Swedish sound, Grotesque in the Sign of Evil is cool. And the only other album I want to mention, because I said Papa was in a million bands, and a lot of them were very good. There's another pretty damn good Swedish band that he did one album with one vocals, and that band is The Crown, and he did this album Crowned in Terror, which I think this was 2002. It's like on the back of they did the Venom logo is the Crown. Uh, these guys they had a lot of albums, and some of them are good, some are not so good. This is like a Swedish melodic sound with a very, very heavy emphasis on Slayer and Motorhead, like even more than At the Gates. They go down full speed with the fucking double kick drums and like the thrash riffs, and they have this Motorhead kind of like pissed off like attitude to them too. And I think this is one of their best albums. And Tampa's vocals are fucking really, really good. They went on to re-record it later when their original vocals, Johan comes back, so they redid the album again with Johan's vocals, and I don't really care for that one. And he was always their vocalist, Johan. He's the band's vocalist, so I'm telling you, I like this original version with Tampa's vocals way more. It fits. Great, great album. So yeah, and he's had a billion bands. He did a grindcore band with a bunch of the guys from Napalm Death called Lockup, and Nick Barker from Cradle of Filth. He was the drummer for there, and he did some like Discharge
This was
TV.
pretty good.
Oh yeah,
The
that
Great
one's
Deceiver.
that's cool. He did a band called Dysphere, which is like kind of Discharge, GBH, like metallic punk. And obviously, if you look up online, like
Motorhead issue.
yeah, he did a ton of bands, and the guy had such a great style of vocals, always unique, always great. I didn't want to go around pulling all that stuff off, but I got most of the stuff he's done musically, and it's always cool. So it's a big fucking loss. But honestly, one of the first albums I did when I heard he passed was I put on Slaughter of the Soul, and then I put on this Crown album. I'm like, man, the guy's vocals were just so fucking pissed off and good. And it is a tragic fucking loss. But
Yeah.
they toured with Tampa in the early 2000s, and I did not see it. And one of my friends saw the Crown come around with Tampa on vocals. They saw him in Chicago, and to this day, he's like, "Dude, it was one of the best shows I ever saw. The crowd was killing each other, and he was such an intense iconic. He was up in front and like just stirring the crowd up into a frenzy because it's much faster than At the Gates. Like it's full throttle stuff." And I guess he might have really relished like the opportunity to play that live and like get the crowd like going fucking bonkers. But every time he tells me, like, man, fuck you. I wish I had seen that tour, but it is what it is. But yeah, great vocalist and a massive fucking loss. And as we always say, fuck cancer, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Rest in peace, Thomas
Yeah.
Lindbergh, and fuck
Mhm.
cancer.
He's going to be missed for sure. For sure. So there you have it, everybody. Our ranking for the At the Gates catalog. Rank them as you like them down in the comments below. I'm sure most of you will agree that there's no bad albums in this catalog. So I guess it depends when you came in or whatever, but they're all, to me, they're all classics of the genre. And yeah, we will miss him, but celebrate his life by listening to the music. That's the way it always goes, and the music will last forever, and that's the good thing. So thanks for watching, everybody. Visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram all the damn
All
time.
the
Please
damn time.
subscribe if you haven't already, and click on that notification bell so you get alerted of all of our content as a post. And please hit the like button before you leave. All right, we'll see you at Hudson Valley Squares tomorrow. Special episode coming up tomorrow night, so we'll see you then. Till then, for Count Ralphus and Ryan Skow, I am Pete Pardo. Have a good one, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Take care. Bye bye.